Today, all about life's equation. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to this post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Today, I'm joined by Peter Cox, author who's just written a book called Life's Equation. Hi, Peter.
Good morning, Martin. Great to be here.
Well, thanks very much for spending the time. Very interesting title to a very interesting book. I think it would be good just for people to understand a little bit about who you are and where you're coming from, and then perhaps we'll go into a bit more detail about the book and what you've been talking about in the book.
Well, Life's Equation was written in the COVID period. I'm an accountant, and I had a little bit of spare time, but I've never written a book before, but I wanted to put something down in writing that reflected my experiences through life and the financial impact that they had as I made decisions, as I went through life. And that's what the book's about.
I think that's really important, right? Because I sometimes say to people when they think about buying a property, right? So they have a transaction, but that echoes down for years and years and years later. The same with your savings, the same with pretty much everything you do, echoes down and has an impact later.
Yes, it does. And it's amazing how we go through life and we forget that we're on this journey. We just enjoy it, and we don't really think about the future. And my book's very superannuation centric. It highlights the need to own your own home, that which you're comfortable in living when you retire, and to provide enough in your super savings to make sure that you're going to be able to live comfortably. So I'm a tax accountant, so the book highlights the tax advantage of boosting your super. And I noticed Effie Zahos this morning on Channel 9 talking about that very same subject. So that's dear to me. That's really the core of the book.
And it's interesting because, of course, the research shows that those who have put superannuation aside and have owned their own property are definitely better positioned as they go into retirement in terms of wealth and in terms of being able to fund their old age appropriately, whereas those who are renting or those who have been stealing from their super or never put super in the first place are significantly less advantaged.
Yes, and it's easy to take the view that, look, super is something that my employer pays, and that'll be there when I need it. But it's actually a vital part of your retirement. There's a decreasing trend, or is a trend to actually pension. People who are relying on pension coming through the system at the moment that would indicate that in 30 years from now, only about 20% of people will actually be drawing on pensions. And those figures are rubbery, and you would know the exact figures. But the point of the book was to make a point to people. Listen, particularly people between 20 and 50. It's such a formative time. And if they can make a simple decision to put more away into super and to be conscious that they're on a path to own their home in retirement, well, then set it and forget it, and you won't have to worry about it anymore.
So this is partly due to this wonderful thing called compound interest, right? So basically,
Sure.
You get interest on interest, and so it helps to grow. But only, of course, if you put stuff away early in life, it gets more and more difficult to do it later. And certainly in my surveys, I find a lot of people, late 40s, early 50s, mid 50s, suddenly sort of, oh, hang on a moment, need to think about retirement. It's almost though a bit too late at that point, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a bit of a tragedy. And I don't know. Look, in the book, I talk about the capital revenue dilemma, and that is understanding what capital is as compared with revenue, which is what you need to spend on your lifestyle. And if you spend capital, as a lot of us do throughout our lives, because we want to buy that car or we want to buy that jet ski, you're spending your retirement right now. And we all know that over time, that spending you do when you're young just it has an unbelievable effect on your retirement. And
Mm.
I'll talk about the early release of super later because it's a pet subject of mine, but it's a classic example of just tapping into all your savings when because you can, and that's what's happening.
But do you think there's a sort of a change in philosophy? I certainly detect it amongst younger people in particular. You know, we never know what the future is going to be like. So let's just live for today. You know, okay, we're going to amass a lot of debt, but that's not really a big issue because rates are so low. Let's not think about the future. Let's just, eat, drink, and be merry for today. Well, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. What do you think about that attitude?
Well, I think that's diminishing. I think in the main, younger people are far more responsible about this. And one of the wonderful takeaways from COVID, if you could call it that, was that it focused more on superannuation as a vital part of your retirement, and it highlighted that. And it's great to see people like Effie's Arms talking about it. And the book, if people want to read it, it's two-hour read. I've been told by many that it's very easy to read. It's not one of these heavy technical books. Pick it up and read it and start to think about where you are in your life because it's not too late.
It's never too late. I always say, I'm a philosopher by background, so I always try and ask that extra question. And one of the questions I keep asking people is, have you thought about this? Think about what you're doing, think about why you're doing it. Don't just sort of follow the flow, as it were. And this is a really, really important conversation, I think, particularly now, because, of course, we have interest rates really, really low. We have a lot of people looking at the property market and seeing prices, well, accelerate, at least for the short term. And we also have got the situation where now the government is, well, actually, in some cases, encouraging people to pull money out of super. And, of course, there are backbenchers, in the government who want to be able to pull super out for buying a house as well. So what's your perspective with regard to this idea of pulling money out of super early?
Look, there are two things that need to be addressed. First of all, when you're buying a home, look, just put repayments in place to make sure that after 15 or 30 years or whatever, you're going to own that home. But super is a vital part of having enough money that's flowing to you by way of pension when you retire. And to play with that or draw it out early is very consequential on the ultimate lifestyle you'll have in retirement. And I talk about that. I add a COVID page and I say the lesson we learned from COVID is this will happen again. And there will be times where your financial plans will be derailed. You'll lose your job. Don't assume that you'll always have super coming out and going to your benefit. So if you have the opportunity to put additional money into super and you can do this up to 25,000 pre-tax into super each year as an individual, well, then do it and set it and forget it and tell your payroll department to start taking it out because you won't miss it. But I tell you what, you will miss the money when you retire.
Yeah, and it's interesting, of course, because people sometimes don't think about how much they will actually need in their retirement until it's a bit too late. And most people tend to accumulate less than they need. And I guess partly rely and hope to rely on the government pension. But the government pension really is hardly going to give you the lifestyle that you want. And my suspicion is that over time it's going to be harder and harder to get access to that in any case.
Yeah. And look, one of the pushbacks with super is that it's all too far away and the government's going to change the rules anyway. I maintain that the government put this in place, or a government put this in place. I think it was Paul Keating, in fact, to make sure people start to provide for their retirement so that the state doesn't or the nation doesn't have to pay out all these pensions. And so it's having that effect so that there's less reliance on the government to provide for your retirement, but you've made the sensible decision, and albeit it's coming from your employer and it potentially may impact your net take-home salary, but it's for a good reason. It's for your retirement. And when you get to retirement at 65, I'm 72, I think, at the moment, and I reckon I've still got about 30 years to go. So I want to have money. So, I'm still contributing to super.
Mm.
And not that I need it. It's just that I can. I'm working still, and money's going in, and I can do that up until the age of 75. And believe you me, when you get to our age, Martin, as you know, there's a lot more to life that we have to live, and that's in the book as well.
And I think you make a really important point, right? Because this is not an end in itself, right? It isn't about accumulating wealth for the sake of accumulating wealth, or to pass it to next generation. This is about enabling you to do the things you want to do, and to enjoy life to the max, and all those things. And that's a very important perspective, I think, because so often it seems to me that we are just thinking about today rather than what's ahead. And as you say, a typical retirement can be 30 to 35 years these days, and that's going to be quite expensive, and many people don't have sufficient funds to be able to work that through even now. And it's going to get probably worse, because with income growth very flat at the moment, and with cost of living rising, I think people are going to find it ever more difficult to make those contributions into super, unless you change your weighting of spending versus saving, and actually, as you say earlier on, give up on maybe some of the frivolous things now and think about the long term.
Yeah, and one of the things I'd use is the Morningstar modeling in the book, and I show that whether you're earning 80 or 120,000 a year, you can, if you make a decision to salary sacrifice and add up to 25,000 a year, you can have an impact to the tune of half a million to 600,000 additional funds in your super, and that's a big difference. And I break it down to a daily, it's something like $18 a day. You decide to invest in that, you suddenly end up with this big nest egg, and all the modeling's there. Check the book. I've verified it with the relevant with ASIC's website, and but go and check it out for yourself. Do your own modelling.
Yeah, and what sort of the average return are you basing that on? Because one of the things that I get from people at the moment is, well, look, returns are probably going to be lower now because rates are so low. Although, of course, stock market has done really well, so it does partly depend on where you put that superannuation. And do you have a perspective also on not only returns, but also whether a self-managed super fund versus actually going with one of the big guys makes more sense?
Well, I think it's look, the average return from an industry fund like Host Plus is about 8 or 9%, and has been over the last 15 years. Look, it may come down slightly, but the cost of living is coming down slightly too, with the interest rates are not projected to rise much over the next 5 years. So people are paying less for their loan. So put that money back into super, because look, super's always, I think I talk about self-managed super funds in there as well, and most people don't realize you need a minimum of $500,000 in a super fund to really get benefit out of managing it all yourself. So I talk about that. In fact, it's closer to $1 million now. But leave it to the managers, because by putting it in super, you're really giving it over to people who have a history of good returns, 8 to 9%. I think Money Smart used in their modelling about 7.5%. So those figures I just quoted were around about a 7.5% return, I believe. So, but the mathematics will still be there. It'll all be relative. Maybe we'll start to see average in funds of 5 to 6%, but we've got a lower cost of ownership of home to balance that out.
Yeah, and that really is the point, isn't it? That those returns are significantly higher than on deposit accounts at the moment, and the cumulative effect of interest on interest on those things. And your point about self-managed super is, I think, really important, because of course there are some base costs required to manage a self-managed super fund, to say nothing of making sure that you actually get the investment strategy right as well. So it's quite complicated. I always suggest people should be really cautious about before they jump into this.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, jolly good. Now, so I guess a couple of final questions then. Firstly, where can people get hold of the book?
Well, it's just type in Peter Cox life's equation into the net, and there are many outlets. Booktopia is a very popular source. It's only $20, and I think it would be money well spent for the average person, particularly in the the 30 to 50 age group.
Well, my recommendation for people is go look at the book, go buy the book, because it's a really simple, straightforward, direct, but quite confrontational read, frankly, because it's getting you to question some of those base assumptions. And Peter, I think it's a really, really important message, and thanks for sharing it with us today.
You're most welcome, Martin.
Thanks.